Emma Whitaker moved through Fort Bragg's training facility like smoke, quiet, efficient, and easily overlooked. At 32, she had perfected the art of invisibility. Her brown hair stayed pulled back in a practical bun. Her scrubs were always pressed, and her gray eyes rarely met anyone's gaze directly. The soldiers called her ghost nurse behind her back, though she wasn't technically a nurse at all. She was a medical assistant, hired 6 months ago to handle the endless stream of training injuries that came with preparing young men and women for combat. Cut fingers from knife training, burns from equipment malfunctions, the occasional dislocated shoulder from hand-to-hand combat practice. Emma had seen it all and handled it with the kind of calm precision that made people forget she was even there, which was exactly how she preferred it. Every morning at 0600, Emma arrived at the medical station before anyone else. She'd prep the trauma bay, organize supplies, and brew coffee strong enough to wake the dead. The facility buzzed with the controlled chaos of military training drill sergeants barking orders, recruits running formations, the constant percussion of weapons fire from the ranges. Emma worked through it all with methodical efficiency, a small figure in sea-green scrubs who seemed to anticipate every need before it arose. The soldiers who bothered to notice her at all saw what they expected to see: a quiet civilian contractor who cleaned up their messes. Some were polite enough, nodding when they passed in the hallways. Others treated her like furniture, useful when needed, invisible otherwise. A few, like Sergeant David Rodriguez, seemed to take pleasure in reminding her of her place in the facility's hierarchy. "Ghost nurse strikes again," Rodriguez would say when Emma appeared to handle an injury, his voice carrying just enough mockery to make nearby soldiers snicker. "Bet she's never seen real blood before today." Emma never responded to the comments. She'd learned long ago that some battles weren't worth fighting, especially when you had bigger secrets to protect. She'd clean the wounds, apply the bandages, file the reports, and return to her station, where she'd spend lunch breaks alone, eating sandwiches while reading medical journals. What none of them knew, what none of them could have guessed, was that Emma Whitaker was the daughter of Jackson Phantom Whitaker, one of the most legendary snipers in Marine Corps history. 3 confirmed kills over 1,200 yards, including the famous ghost shot that ended a hostage situation in Fallujah. Military blogs still debated whether some of his reported shots were even physically possible. Emma wore her father's watch every day, a simple black Timex that had timed countless missions across 2 wars. She'd inherited more than just the watch when Jackson died of a heart attack 3 years ago. She'd inherited 20 years of training, muscle memory that could put bullets through playing cards at 300 yards, and a precision that extended far beyond marksmanship into every aspect of her life. But she'd also inherited his burden, the weight of what those skills could do, the responsibility that came with being a weapon disguised as a person. After Jackson's funeral, Emma had left her position as a combat medic. 8 years of military service, 2 tours in Afghanistan, dozens of lives saved under fire, all of it felt meaningless without him there to share it with. She'd tried civilian nursing for a while, but hospitals felt too sterile, too removed from the world she understood. The training facility job was perfect. Military environment, medical work, but no combat. She could serve without killing, help without harming. The irony wasn't lost on her that she'd ended up back where she started, surrounded by soldiers who saw her as nothing more than a Band-Aid dispenser. But anonymity had its advantages. Nobody asked probing questions about her background. Nobody expected her to be anything more than competent at basic medical care. Nobody suspected that the quiet woman organizing gauze pads could put 3 rounds through a quarter at 500 yards. Emma's small apartment off base reflected her carefully cultivated ordinary life. Medical textbooks, a few photographs of her father, in dress blues and locked in a closet she rarely opened, his custom M24 rifle. She'd maintained it religiously since his death, but never fired it. That part of her life was over. Or so she thought. The first sign that her carefully constructed piece was about to shatter came on a Tuesday morning during knife combat training. Private Marcus Johnson, a cocky 19-year-old from Texas, was showing off for his squad. He'd been spinning his training blade, attempting some flashy disarming technique he'd probably seen in a movie, when the knife slipped from his grip. Time seemed to slow as Emma watched the blade tumble through the air. Her father's training kicked in automatically. Threat assessment, trajectory calculation, probable impact point. The knife was going to hit Private Collins in the neck, and from the angle and speed, it was going to be bad. Emma was moving before the blade finished its arc. She crossed the 15 feet of training mat in seconds, not running but flowing like water, her movements economic and purposeful. The knife caught Collins in the shoulder instead of the neck. He'd started to turn at the sound of shouting, but it was deep, and from the spray pattern, it had nicked the subclavian artery. The room erupted in chaos. Soldiers shouting, someone, screaming for a medic, Private Johnson backing away with his hands up, swearing he hadn't meant for it to happen. Through it all, Emma worked with the kind of calm that only came from having done this under fire. Literally. I need gauze and medical tape, she said, her voice cutting through the noise without being raised. Now, nobody moved. They were all staring at the blood, at Collins, who was looking pale and frightened, at Emma, who had her hands pressed against the wound with perfect pressure. Now, Emma said, and there was something in her tone command authority that came from having given orders when lives hung in the balance that made Sergeant Rodriguez scramble for the medical kit. Emma worked steadily, stopped the bleeding, cleaned the wound, applied a pressure bandage that would hold until the paramedics arrived. Her hands never shook, her breathing never quickened, her focus never wavered. Are you a doctor? Collins asked, his voice tight with pain but no longer panicked. No, Emma replied, checking his pulse. Just experienced. The paramedics arrived 12 minutes later. Emma had been counting automatically, another habit from her combat medic days. They were impressed by her work, asking if she had military medical training. Emma nodded but didn't elaborate. After they left, the training room buzzed with conversation about Emma, about her skills, about the way she'd taken control of the situation. But by the next day, most had forgotten. It was easier to go back to seeing her as the ghost nurse than to confront the possibility that they'd been wrong about her. Most, but not all. Sergeant Rodriguez started watching her more closely, and his comments took on a sharper edge. Think you're hot stuff because you can slap on a bandage? He'd say when she passed in the hallway. Bet you learned all that from YouTube videos. Emma endured it all, focused on her work, tried to maintain her invisibility. But something had shifted that day. She'd revealed a crack in her carefully constructed facade, and cracks had a way of widening under pressure. As she sat alone in the medical station that evening, checking her father's watch and thinking about the day's events, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that her peaceful anonymity was living on borrowed time. She was right. The comments started small. Nurse Know-It-All became Rodriguez's favorite name for Emma, delivered with just enough venom to make nearby soldiers uncomfortable, but not enough to be officially inappropriate. He'd use it when requesting supplies, when passing in the hallway, whenever he wanted to remind her and everyone else that he didn't appreciate being shown up by a civilian contractor. Emma tried to ignore it, but Rodriguez had a talent for timing. He'd make his comments when she was helping injured soldiers, turning moments of professional competence into something that felt embarrassing, presumptuous. Other soldiers began to notice the tension, and Emma could feel the shift in how they looked at her. Must be nice, Rodriguez said one afternoon as Emma finished treating a recruit's sprained wrist. Having all the answers when you've never been shot at. The recruit glanced between them, sensing the undercurrent but not understanding it. Emma handed him an ice pack and discharge instructions without responding to Rodriguez's comment, but something cold settled in her chest. If only he knew. The breaking point came during a particularly busy week when 3 different training exercises resulted in multiple injuries. Emma had been working 12-hour days, barely stopping to eat, handling everything from severe burns to a concussion that required careful monitoring. She was exhausted but professional, competent but invisible, exactly what she trained herself to be. On Friday evening, as she was restocking the medical supplies for the weekend shift, Colonel Adams stopped by the medical station. Emma had rarely interacted with the facility's commanding officer, but she'd observed him enough to know he was fair-minded and respected by his soldiers. "Miss Whitaker," he said, and Emma looked up from her inventory checklist. "I wanted to thank you personally for your work this week. The medical reports I've been reading are impressive. Quick response times, proper treatment protocols, no complications. The medics at the hospital specifically mentioned your pre-treatment of the burn victim, said it probably saved his life." Emma felt a flutter of something she hadn't experienced in months' professional pride. "Thank you, sir. I'm just doing my job." "You're doing it exceptionally well," Adams replied. "I'd like to discuss expanding your role here. Maybe additional training, more responsibility. You clearly have the skills for it." After Adams left, Emma allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. Maybe her careful competence was paying off. Maybe she could build a career here, find stability, honor her father's memory through service rather than warfare. The moment lasted exactly until Monday morning, when she discovered what Rodriguez had been up to. "Heard you got a little praise from the colonel," Rodriguez said, cornering her in the supply closet. Must have been a slow week for him to notice. "The help." Emma tried to step around him, but Rodriguez blocked her path. "You know what I think? I think you're getting a little too comfortable here. Starting to forget your place." "I'm just doing my job, Sergeant. Your job is to hand out Band-Aids and clean up messes. Your job is not to play doctor, not to give medical advice, and definitely not to make the rest of us look bad with your little performance last week." Emma met his eyes for the first time in months. Performance? All that dramatic, life-saving bullshit. Like you're some kind of hero instead of just another contractor who learned basic first aid. Rodriguez stepped closer, using his height to intimidate. "I've been asking around about you, Miss Whitaker. Funny thing, nobody seems to know much about your background. No nursing degree, no paramedic certification. Just some mysterious experience you keep talking about." Emma's hands went still on the supply box she'd been lifting. Rodriguez had been investigating her background. How much had he found? How much was there to find? Makes a guy wonder. Rodriguez continued, "What you're hiding, what you're running from. Because people don't just show up at military facilities with convenient medical skills and no paperwork trail. My credentials were verified when I was hired. Basic credentials. Sure, but I'm talking about the real story. The one you don't want to tell." Rodriguez smiled, and it wasn't pleasant. "Don't worry, I'll figure it out. And when I do, we'll see how impressed the colonel is with his star contractor." After Rodriguez left, Emma stood alone in the supply closet, her hands shaking for the first time since the knife incident. She'd been so careful, so thorough in creating her new identity. Her military records were sealed. Her father's connection buried in classified files it required high-level clearance to access. But Rodriguez was persistent, and if he kept digging... That night, Emma sat in her apartment, her father's rifle. Case opened for the first time in months. She wasn't planning anything, just touching base with the part of herself she'd been trying to forget. The M24 was exactly as she'd left it, perfectly maintained, custom modifications that Jackson had made over years of use. A tool designed for one purpose, putting bullets exactly where they needed to go. Emma had inherited her father's precision, but she'd also inherited his wisdom. Jackson had taught her that the most dangerous weapon was the one your enemy didn't know you had. For 3 years, she'd been the ultimate hidden weapon, a combat-trained sniper disguised as a medical assistant. But hiding had its costs. Rodriguez's investigation, his increasing hostility, the way other soldiers were starting to look at her with suspicion rather than respect. It was all building towards something Emma couldn't control from her position of artificial weakness. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Enjoyed our conversation today. Looking forward to learning more about your background. Sleep tight. Dr. Rodriguez had her personal phone number. He was escalating beyond workplace harassment into something more personal, more threatening. Emma stared at the message, then at her father's rifle, then at the photo on her mantle showing Jackson in his Marine dress blues, rows of medals including the Navy Cross he'd earned for the ghost shot. "What would you do, Dad?" she whispered to the empty apartment. The answer came to her in Jackson's voice, clear as if he were sitting beside her. "Sometimes, sweetheart, the best way to end a fight is to show them exactly who they're fighting." Emma closed the rifle case and made her decision. She'd given peace a chance, tried to honor her father's memory through healing rather than warfare. But Rodriguez had made it clear that peace wasn't an option. He wanted to know who she really was. Maybe it was time to show him. Rodriguez's campaign against Emma intensified over the next 2 weeks. He'd found allies among the younger sergeants, soldiers who resented civilian contractors in general and competent women in particular. They'd make comments about playing nurse and fake credentials, just loud enough for Emma to hear. They'd question her decisions, second-guess her medical assessments, and create an atmosphere of doubt around everything she did. Emma endured it all with the same quiet professionalism she'd maintained for months, but inside she was making preparations. She began documenting everything: times, dates, witnesses, exact quotes. Her father had taught her that intelligence gathering was as important as marksmanship, and Rodriguez was giving her plenty of ammunition. The harassment took a more serious turn when Emma arrived at work one morning to find her medical station ransacked. Supplies scattered, equipment moved, her carefully organized inventory sheets scattered across the floor. A note was taped, too. Her computer monitor. "Maybe you should stick to what you know." A friend. Emma photographed everything before cleaning up, adding the images to the file she was building. Rodriguez had escalated to vandalism, probably thinking he could intimidate her into quitting. He had no idea he was hunting a predator who'd been trained by the best. That afternoon, Master Sergeant Williams stopped by the medical station. Williams was old-school military, a 20-year veteran who'd earned his stripes in Iraq and Afghanistan. He was respected throughout the facility, and his opinion carried weight with Colonel Adams. "Miss Whitaker," Williams said, his voice carefully neutral, "I wanted to ask you about something. I've been hearing rumors-questions about your qualifications, your background. Wanted to give you a chance to address them directly." Emma looked up from her supply inventory, meeting Williams' eyes. "What kind of questions?" "The kind that suggest maybe you're not who you say you are. Maybe you're hiding something that could be relevant to your position here." Williams sat down, his expression serious. "I've been watching you work for months. Your medical skills are solid. Your response times are excellent, and you handle pressure better than most combat medics I've known. But Sergeant Rodriguez has raised some concerns about your credentials, your background checks." "What specifically is he claiming?" "He's suggesting that your paperwork might be incomplete, that there are gaps in your history that weren't properly investigated during your hiring process." Williams leaned forward. He's also suggesting that Colonel Adams might be interested in reviewing your file more carefully. Emma felt something cold settle in her stomach. Rodriguez was going after her job now, trying to create enough doubt to force a deeper background investigation. If Colonel Adams ordered a comprehensive review, her sealed military records might be opened. Her carefully constructed new identity would crumble. Sergeant Rodriguez seems to have a lot of opinions about my qualifications, Emma said carefully. He does, and he's been sharing them with anyone who'll listen. Williams studied her face. The thing is, I've been around long enough to recognize certain qualities in people. The way you move, the way you assess situations, the way you stay calm under pressure. You remind me of people I've served with in combat. Emma's hands went still on her clipboard. Williams was fishing, but he was also observant. How much had he noticed? How much had he guessed? I think, Williams continued, that whatever Rodriguez thinks he's uncovered, he might not understand the full picture, and I think he might be making a mistake by pushing this issue. What are you saying, Master Sergeant? I'm saying that, if you have a story to tell, it might be better to tell it on your own terms, rather than let Rodriguez control the narrative. Williams stood up. I'm saying that if Rodriguez is hunting something he doesn't understand, he might find more than he bargained for. After Williams left, Emma sat alone in the medical station, staring at her father's watch. 15:47 hours. In 30 minutes, the afternoon training session would begin, and she'd be back to handling the endless stream of minor injuries that made up her official duties. But underneath the routine, war was being declared. Rodriguez wanted to know who she really was. Fine, but he was about to learn that some secrets were kept for everyone's protection, not just hers. That evening, Emma made a phone call to a number she hadn't used in 3 years. It was answered on the second ring. This is Captain Morrison. Records Division. Sir, this is Emma. She caught herself. This is Staff Sergeant Whitaker. Service number 28479563421. I need to speak with you about my sealed records. A pause. WHHE or Emma Whitaker. I remember you. Phantom's daughter. Your father was a hell of a Marine. Yes, sir. I have a situation that might require my records to be clarified. What kind of situation? Emma explained about Rodriguez, about his investigation, about the escalating harassment. Morrison listened without interrupting, occasionally asking for clarification on dates and specifics. So you're asking me to unseal your records? I'm asking you to be ready to unseal them if it becomes necessary. Someone's digging into my background, and I'd rather control how the information comes out than let them stumble onto it accidentally. Understood. I'll make sure your file is ready for immediate release on your authorization. And Whitaker? Your father would be proud of how you've handled this so far. But if push comes to shove, don't let them forget who trained you. Emma hung up the phone and looked at her father's rifle case. She'd spent 3 years running from who she was, trying to honor Jackson's memory through healing instead of warfare. But Rodriguez had made it clear that running wasn't an option anymore. Time to stop being the ghost nurse and remind everyone why Jackson Whitaker had been called the Phantom. The hunt was about to become a war, and Emma had been trained by the best predator the Marine Corps had ever produced. Rodriguez had no idea what he'd awakened. The mandatory firearms qualification came with 1 week's notice. Every facility personnel, combat, support, and civilian contractors were required to demonstrate basic weapons proficiency. Emma read the memo twice, understanding immediately that this wasn't routine scheduling. Rodriguez had arranged this, probably convinced Colonel Adams that support staff needed evaluation after some manufactured concern about readiness. Gonna be interesting, she heard Rodriguez tell another sergeant as she passed in the hallway. See who's been telling the truth about their qualifications. Emma spent the week preparing, but not in the way Rodriguez expected. She researched the facility's shooting range, studied the equipment roster, and planned her approach carefully. Her father had taught her that every engagement was won or lost in the preparation phase. This wouldn't be a demonstration of her skills. It would be a revelation. The night before the qualification, Emma sat in her apartment with her father's M24 disassembled on her kitchen table. She cleaned each component with the methodical precision Jackson had drilled into her, muscle memory taking over as her mind focused on the coming day. She wasn't planning to use this rifle. It would stay locked in her closet. But the ritual connected her to Jackson's teachings, to the legacy she'd been trying to escape. Precision with purpose, she whispered, repeating one of her father's favorite phrases. Strength with compassion. Tomorrow would require both. Qualification day dawned cold and gray, with a crosswind that would challenge even experienced shooters. Emma arrived at the range early, before the other support staff, and found Master Sergeant Williams setting up equipment. "Morning, Miss Whitaker," Williams said, not looking up from the rifle he was inspecting. "Ready for today?" "As ready as I can be." Williams held up an old M24 sniper rifle, the same model her father had used, though this one was clearly a training weapon with basic optics. "Thought you might be interested in this. Found it in the back of the armory. Figured I'd clean it up, make sure it's functional." Emma studied the rifle, noting the modifications, the wear patterns, the way Williams held it. "You planning to use that today?" "Thought I might let someone else have a try. See what they can do with a real precision instrument." Williams met her eyes. "Any volunteers?" Emma understood. Williams had figured out at least part of her background, and he was offering her a choice. She could continue hiding behind her medical assistant persona, or she could step into the light and show everyone exactly who Emma Whitaker really was. "I'll think about it," she said. The qualification began at 0800 with basic handgun proficiency. Emma performed adequately, good enough to pass, not good enough to stand out. She watched Rodriguez working his way through the support staff, making comments about civilian contractors playing soldier, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Your turn, Nurse Know-It-All," Rodriguez called when Emma approached the pistol line. "Let's see what YouTube taught you about shooting." Several soldiers gathered to watch, expecting entertainment. Emma took her position, loaded the Beretta M9, and fired her qualification rounds. 8 out of 10 hits in the acceptable zone, competent but unremarkable. "Not bad for a beginner," Rodriguez said with mock praise. "Maybe you should stick to that instead of trying the real weapons." The rifle qualification was next. Most of the support staff struggled with the M16s, managing to hit the 100-yard targets, but with scattered groups that barely met minimum standards. Emma fired her course with the same calculated mediocrity she'd used with the pistol. Good enough to pass, forgettable enough to maintain her cover. Then, Williams approached with the M24. "This is a specialized weapon," Williams announced to the group. "Sniper rifle, bolt action, requires significant skill to use effectively. I thought we'd have a little demonstration. Show everyone what precision shooting looks like." Rodriguez stepped forward immediately. "I'll give it a try, Master Sergeant. I've got hunting experience." Williams handed him the rifle. Rodriguez took his time setting up, adjusting the scope, talking about his deer hunting back in Georgia. He fired 3 shots at the 200-yard target, managing to hit the paper, but with a group spread that would have been embarrassing even for a beginner. "Not bad," Williams said diplomatically. "Anyone else want to try?" Several soldiers volunteered, with similar results. The M24 was clearly beyond their skill level, and the crosswind wasn't helping. Emma watched from the back of the group, calculating wind speed and direction automatically, her father's training running constant analysis of conditions and corrections. "How about you, Miss Whitaker?" Williams called out, his voice carrying across the range. "Want to give it a shot?" The group turned to look at her, and Emma saw the mixture of expressions: curiosity, skepticism, and from Rodriguez, barely concealed glee at the opportunity to watch her fail publicly. "I don't think," Emma started. "Come on," Rodriguez interrupted. "Fair's fair. Everyone gets a turn." Emma approached the rifle, her movements suddenly different. The careful invisibility fell away, replaced by the fluid precision of someone who'd done this thousands of times. She picked up the M24, feeling its weight, its balance, the familiar comfort of a precision instrument in trained hands. The joking stopped. Something about her posture, her grip, the way she naturally fell into shooting position, commanded attention. Emma adjusted the scope with quick, professional movements, her body settling into a prone position that looked like it had been born there. She controlled her breathing, found her natural respiratory pause, and aligned the crosshairs. 300 yards to target, crosswind from the left at approximately 8 miles per hour. She made her corrections automatically, muscle memory from 20 years of training taking over. The first shot echoed across the range. Through the spotting scope, Williams called out the result. Dead center. Emma cycled the bolt, adjusted for the slight shift in wind conditions, and fired again. Dead center. One more shot, this time aimed at the smallest target ring. The bullet hole appeared exactly where she'd intended. "Perfect score," Williams announced, his voice carrying a note of respect that made everyone on the range pay attention. Emma stood up, handed the rifle back to Williams, and started to walk away. The spell was broken, conversations resuming, but she could feel the weight of stares following her. "Wait a minute," Rodriguez called out, his voice sharp with suspicion. "That was luck. Has to be." Emma turned back, meeting his eyes for the first time in weeks. "Excuse me?" "Nobody shoots like that without extensive training. Nobody." Rodriguez's face was flushed, angry. "I want to know where you learned to do that. I want to know who you really are." The range fell silent. Emma looked at the faces surrounding her: soldiers who'd dismissed her for months, support staff who'd watched her endure Rodriguez's harassment, Williams who'd been waiting for this moment. "You want to know who I am?" Emma said quietly. "Ask Master Sergeant Williams. He figured it out weeks ago." Williams stepped forward, the M24 still in his hands. "Ladies and gentlemen, meet Emma Whitaker, daughter of Gunnery Sergeant Jackson. Phantom Whitaker, 3-time recipient of the Navy Cross and the most decorated sniper in Marine Corps history." The silence stretched long enough to hear the wind across the empty range. "She's also," Williams continued, "a former staff sergeant, combat medic, 2 tours in Afghanistan, and trained in precision marksmanship by the man who held the record for the longest confirmed kill in Marine Corps history." Rodriguez's face went white. "That's impossible." "Her background check. Her records are sealed," Williams said. "Classified clearance required. But I've seen enough combat veterans to recognize the real thing when I see it." Emma looked around. The circle of faces, seeing the shift from skepticism to recognition to something approaching awe. She'd spent months hiding, trying to escape her father's legacy, but Rodriguez had forced her hand. "You wanted to know who I am," Emma said, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who'd commanded respect in life-or-death situations. "Now you know." She walked away from the range, leaving behind the ghost nurse persona she'd carefully constructed and embracing, for the first time in 3 years, exactly who Emma Whitaker really was. The war was over. She'd won without firing. A shout in anger, exactly as her father had taught her. But the real reckoning was just beginning. Word spread through Fort Bragg like wildfire. By evening, everyone knew that the quiet medical assistant who'd been cleaning up their training injuries was actually Staff Sergeant Emma Whitaker, daughter of the legendary Phantom, trained by the most respected sniper in Marine Corps history. Emma found herself in an impossible position. The anonymity she'd carefully constructed was gone, but the attention that replaced it was almost worse. Soldiers who'd ignored her for months now sought her out, wanting to hear stories about her father, asking for shooting tips, treating her with a reverence that made her deeply uncomfortable. Rodriguez had disappeared after the range demonstration, but Emma knew he wasn't finished. Men like him didn't accept defeat gracefully, especially when that defeat was as public and humiliating as what had happened at the shooting range. She was right to be concerned. Colonel Adams requested a meeting the next morning. Emma reported to his office at 0800, unsure whether she was about to be commended or terminated. Adams was behind his desk, her personnel file open in front of him, his expression unreadable. "Sit down, Miss Whitaker," Adams said. "Or should I say Staff Sergeant Whitaker?" "Emma is fine, sir. I'm a civilian now. Are you?" Adams leaned back in his chair. "Because according to the files I've been reading since yesterday, you're one of the most qualified combat medics and precision marksmen to ever serve in this facility. And you've been hiding it for 6 months." Emma met his gaze steadily. "I wasn't hiding anything, sir. I was trying to start over by working as a medical assistant instead of using your actual qualifications. By serving in a way that didn't require me to carry a weapon." Adams studied her for a long moment. "Your father's death?" "Yes, sir. After he died, I needed to find a different way to serve." "And Sergeant Rodriguez's harassment?" Emma felt a flash of surprise. "You know about that?" "I know about all of it. The comments, the intimidation, the investigation into your background. Master Sergeant Williams has been keeping me informed." Adams closed her file. "The question is, what do we do about it?" "Sir?" "Rodriguez violated several regulations regarding workplace harassment. He also exceeded his authority by conducting an unauthorized investigation into a civilian contractor's background. Those are serious charges." Emma considered her options. She could push for formal charges against Rodriguez, probably get him demoted or transferred. But that would mean more attention, more questions, more disruption to the careful balance she'd been trying to maintain. "I don't want to make this bigger than it needs to be," she said finally. "Too late for that," Adams replied. "Word is already spreading beyond this facility. I've had 3 different special operations units call asking about you. Apparently, your reputation precedes you." Emma's heart sank. The military was a small world, and skilled personnel were always in demand. If word got out about her real capabilities, the job offers would start coming. And with them, pressure to return to combat, to use her father's training for its intended purpose. "I'm not interested in returning to active duty," she said. "I understand. But I'm interested in utilizing your skills here." Adams leaned forward. "I'm offering you a promotion. Senior Medical Officer, Training Coordinator for Combat Medics, Consultant for our precision shooting programs. Full civilian contractor benefits, significant pay increase, and the respect you should have been receiving all along." It was everything. Emma had been afraid of official recognition, expanded responsibilities, a return to the world she'd been trying to escape. But it was also an opportunity to serve on her own terms, to use her father's training for healing rather than killing. What about Rodriguez? Rodriguez is being transferred, effective immediately. His behavior was unacceptable, and frankly, he became a liability the moment he decided to target you. Emma felt a complex mix of emotions: relief, vindication, and something that might have been disappointment. She'd been prepared for a war, armed with documentation and testimony and righteous anger. But Adams had already won the battle for her, handled the politics while she'd been focused on the personal conflict. "There's one more thing," Adams continued. I want you to know that your father's reputation opened doors for this conversation. But your own performance over the past 6 months is what convinced me you deserve this position. The medical reports, the way you handled the knife incident, your response to every crisis that's come through those doors. That's all you, not your father's legacy. After the meeting, Emma walked through the facility with mixed feelings. Soldiers nodded respectfully as she passed, some stopping to introduce themselves properly for the first time. The ghost nurse was gone, replaced by someone who commanded automatic respect and authority. But with that recognition came responsibility. At lunch, 3 different soldiers approached her with questions about precision shooting. 2 medics asked for advice about trauma response. A young recruit wanted to know if she thought he had what it took to be a sniper. Emma answered their questions, shared what knowledge she could, but inside she felt the weight of her father's legacy settling on her shoulders. Jackson had carried the burden of being seen as a weapon first, a person second. Now she understood what that felt like. That evening, she sat in her apartment with her father's M24 across her lap, no longer hidden in the closet, but displayed where she could see it. She'd cleaned it earlier, a ritual that felt different now, not like maintaining a relic, but like caring for a tool she might need again. Her phone rang. Master Sergeant Williams. Emma? I wanted to check on you. Big day. Yeah, still processing it all. You did good today. At the range, I mean. Your father would have been proud. Emma smiled, the first genuine smile she'd felt in weeks. Thanks, Williams. That means a lot. You know, I served with your father once, briefly in Iraq. He saved my squad from a sniper who had us pinned down. One shot, 800 yards, through a window no bigger than a paperback book. The Fallujah incident? Different one. Point is, I know what kind of man your father was. Precise, professional, but also compassionate. He never took a shot unless it was necessary, and he never celebrated afterward. That's what made him special, not just the skill, but the responsibility he felt for it. Emma understood what Williams was telling her. You think I'm ready for this? I think you've been ready for this since the day you walked in here. You just needed to remember who you are. After hanging up, Emma opened her father's letter, the one Colonel Adams had given her weeks ago, the one she'd read dozens of times but never truly absorbed. If you're reading this, you've shown them who you really are. I'm proud of you, not for the shooting, but for the reasons you choose to shoot. Precision with purpose, strength with compassion. That's what I taught you. That's who you are. For the first time since Jackson's death, Emma felt like she understood what he'd been trying to tell her. It wasn't about hiding from her abilities or embracing them completely. It was about using them responsibly, with purpose, for the right reasons. She was ready to stop running from her father's legacy and start building her own. Emma's new position as senior medical officer came with an office, a staff of 6 medics, and responsibilities that extended far beyond treating training injuries. She was tasked with developing emergency response protocols, training combat medics in advanced trauma care, and consulting on the facility's precision shooting programs. It should have felt like victory, but Emma discovered that recognition brought its own challenges. The job offers started within a week. Special forces units, private military contractors, government agencies, everyone wanted Jackson Whitaker's daughter on their team. Emma declined them all, but the attention was relentless. Her phone rang constantly with recruiters who'd somehow obtained her personal number. More troubling were the soldiers who now saw her as a curiosity rather than a person. They'd find excuses to visit the medical office, hoping to hear war stories or get shooting tips. Some were respectful, others pushy, all of them reducing her to her father's legacy rather than seeing her own accomplishments. It's like being a zoo animal, Emma confided to Williams during one of their informal mentoring sessions. Everyone wants to see the legendary sniper's daughter in action. Give it time, Williams advised. The novelty will wear off. Meanwhile, focus on the work. Show them what you can do as Emma Whitaker, not just as Jackson's daughter. Emma threw herself into her new responsibilities with the same methodical precision she'd applied to everything else. She redesigned the medical station's layout for maximum efficiency, implemented new trauma protocols based on her combat experience, and began training the facility's medics in advanced techniques she'd learned in Afghanistan. The results were immediate and impressive. Response times improved, treatment outcomes got better, and the medical team began operating with a level of coordination that impressed even Colonel Adams. Emma was building something worthwhile, creating a legacy based on healing rather than killing. But Rodriguez wasn't finished with her. 2 weeks into her new position, Emma arrived at work to find a formal complaint filed against her with the base inspector general. The charges were serious: falsification of employment records, failure to disclose military background, potential security violations in obtaining her position. Rodriguez had enlisted a civilian attorney and was claiming that Emma had defrauded the government by concealing her true qualifications during the hiring process. He was demanding a full investigation, arguing that her sealed records might contain information relevant to national security. Emma read through the complaint with growing anger. Rodriguez couldn't attack her competence anymore, so he was attacking her integrity. Every allegation was technically false. Her background check had been thorough, her records properly sealed, her qualifications honestly presented, but defending against them would require resources, time, and the kind of public scrutiny Emma had been trying to avoid. "This is harassment," Colonel Adams said when Emma brought him the complaint. "Rodriguez is trying to destroy your career because you made him look bad. Can he succeed? He can make things very unpleasant. An IG investigation takes months, involves interviews with everyone you've worked with, requires you to justify every decision you've made. Even if you're completely cleared, which you will be, the process is designed to be miserable." Emma felt the familiar cold anger that had sustained her through combat, the precise focus that came when someone threatened something she cared about. Rodriguez wanted a war. She'd give him one, but it would be fought with the same methodical precision her father had used in everything he did. "I need my complete military file unsealed," Emma told Adams. "All of it. Not just the basic service record, everything." That's a big step. Once those records are open, there's no putting them back under classification. Rodriguez wants to know who I really am. Let's show him. Emma spent the next 3 days preparing her counterattack. She contacted Captain Morrison in Records, a division, and authorized the complete release of her military file. She gathered testimonials from her commanding officers in Afghanistan, her medical school instructors, her combat medic students. She documented every interaction she'd had with Rodriguez, every witness to his harassment, every regulation he'd violated in his campaign against her. When the Inspector General's office called to schedule her interview, Emma was ready. The meeting took place in a sterile conference room with IG investigators, Colonel Adams, and a representative from the base legal office. Emma arrived with 3 folders of documentation and the quiet confidence that came from being absolutely certain of her ground. "Miss Whitaker," the lead investigator began, "Sergeant Rodriguez has alleged that you obtained your position here through misrepresentation of your qualifications. How do you respond?" Emma opened her first folder. "Every qualification I listed on my application was accurate. My background check was conducted according to standard procedures. My military records were properly sealed due to the classified nature of my combat assignments, but all relevant information was available to the hiring authority." She handed over copies of her original application, background check results, and hiring documentation. "As you can see, I never claimed to be a civilian with no military experience. I identified myself as a former combat medic with specialized training. But you didn't specify the extent of that training. The extent of my training was classified. Still is, technically, though I've authorized its release for this investigation. Emma opened her second folder. Here's my complete military file. Combat medic, sniper qualified, multiple commendations for life-saving actions under fire. 2 bronze stars, 1 silver star, and a Navy Cross recommendation that was downgraded due to the classified nature of the operation. The investigators read through her file in stunned silence. Emma's service record was extraordinary, not just for a combat medic, but for anyone. Her medical training was extensive, her combat experience undeniable, her qualifications far beyond what the position required. These are impressive credentials, the lead investigator said finally. Why didn't you seek a position that utilized them fully? Because I was trying to serve in a way that didn't require me to carry a weapon, Emma replied. My father died 3 years ago. After his funeral, I couldn't bear the thought of returning to combat. The medical assistant position allowed me to serve, to use my medical training, without the combat responsibilities. And Sergeant Rodriguez's allegations? Emma opened her third folder. Sergeant Rodriguez has been conducting a campaign of harassment against me since my 2nd week here. I have documentation of inappropriate comments, workplace intimidation, unauthorized investigation into my background, and escalating behavior that culminated in vandalism of my workstation. She presented her evidence methodically: photographs, witness statements, documented incidents, the threatening text message Rodriguez had sent to her personal phone. By the time she finished, the investigators were looking uncomfortable. This paints a very different picture of the situation. One of them said, Sergeant Rodriguez discovered that I had military experience and became threatened by it, Emma continued. When I demonstrated competence that exceeded his expectations, he began a systematic campaign to undermine my position here. This complaint is the latest escalation in that campaign. The investigation concluded 2 days later with a complete exoneration for Emma and formal charges filed against Rodriguez for harassment, conduct unbecoming, and filing a false official report. He was demoted to corporal and transferred to a supply depot in North Dakota. Emma felt no satisfaction in his downfall. Rodriguez had been a symptom, not the disease, a small man threatened by competence he couldn't understand or control. His punishment wouldn't change the fact that Emma would always have to navigate the complex territory between her abilities and others' expectations. But for the first time since taking the job, Emma felt like she could build something lasting. She had the respect of her colleagues, the support of her command, and the freedom to serve in a way that honored both her father's memory and her own values. The war was over. Now the real work could begin. 6 months after the Rodriguez investigation, Emma stood in front of a classroom filled with combat medics from across the base. She was teaching advanced trauma care, sharing techniques she'd learned in Afghanistan, training the next generation of battlefield medics who might someday save lives under fire. The difference between a good medic and a great medic, Emma told her students, isn't just technical skill. It's the ability to stay calm when everything around you is chaos, to make precise decisions when lives hang in the balance, to be the steady presence that wounded soldiers can depend on. One of the students, a young corporal named Davis, raised her hand. Ma'am, how do you develop that kind of calm? Emma thought about her father's training, about 20 years of learning precision under pressure, about the moment in that supply closet when Rodriguez had tried to intimidate her, and she'd chosen to respond with methodical preparation rather than emotional reaction. Practice, Emma said simply. Preparation. An understanding that your job isn't about you, it's about the people you're sworn to help. After class, Emma returned to her office to find Colonel Adams waiting with a visitor, a woman in civilian, clothes with the bearing of someone accustomed to command. Emma, this is Director Patricia Kane from the Defense Medical Research Institute. She has a proposition for you. Director Kane stood and extended her hand. Miss Whitaker, I've been following your work here. Your trauma protocols have reduced casualty rates by 30%, and your medic training program is being adopted across 3 other installations. We'd like you to develop a comprehensive combat medical training curriculum for Special Operations Forces. Emma listened as Kane outlined the position, a chance to influence military medical training at the highest levels, to share her father's lessons about precision and preparation with elite units around the world. It was an opportunity to make a real difference, to create something that would save lives for decades to come. It would require travel, Kane continued, working with Special Forces units, spending time at different bases. But you'd be setting the standard for combat medical training across all branches of service. A year ago, Emma would have declined immediately. The position would put her back in the world of elite military units, surrounded by the kind of soldiers who'd known her father, who'd see her as Jackson Whitaker's daughter first and a medical professional second. But something had changed over the past months. Emma had learned to carry her father's legacy without being crushed by it, to honor his memory while building her own reputation. She was no longer running from who she was building on it. I'm interested, Emma said, but I have conditions. She negotiated carefully home base at Fort Bragg, control over curriculum development, the right to maintain her current team. Kane agreed to everything, recognizing that Emma was exactly what their program needed. 2 weeks later, Emma found herself on a transport plane heading to Fort Campbell, where she'd be working with the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. Her first assignment was developing medical protocols for combat search and rescue. Operations challenging work that required understanding both tactical medicine and precision operations. The unit's commander, Lieutenant Colonel Mark Stevens, met her at the airfield. Miss Whitaker, welcome to the Night Stalkers. I knew your father served with him in Iraq. He was one of the finest soldiers I ever worked with. Emma had learned to handle these conversations with grace rather than discomfort. Thank you, sir. He always spoke highly of the aviation community. I'll be honest, Stevens continued as they walked toward the unit headquarters. When we heard Jackson Whitaker's daughter was coming to work with us, there were some expectations. Some of my soldiers are hoping you'll share shooting techniques, war stories, that sort of thing. I'm here to work on medical protocols, sir. Combat medicine is my specialty. Good. That's what we need. Though I understand you've inherited some of your father's other skills as well. Emma smiled. Precision runs in the family. Over the following weeks, Emma threw herself into the work with characteristic intensity. She studied the 160th operations, analyzed their casualty patterns, interviewed pilots and crew chiefs about medical challenges during combat missions. Her protocols needed to account for the unique environment of Special Operations Aviation treating trauma in confined spaces. During flight operations, under conditions where normal medical procedures were impossible. The work was rewarding in ways Emma hadn't expected. These were elite soldiers who understood the value of preparation, who appreciated competence regardless of its source. They treated her as a professional first, respecting her medical expertise while acknowledging her father's legacy without being overwhelmed by it. One evening, as Emma was reviewing casualty reports in the unit's medical facility, Chief Warrant Officer Jake Harrison stopped by. Harrison was a veteran pilot with 15 years of special operations experience, someone who'd seen enough combat to recognize authentic expertise. Doc, Harrison said, the unit had started calling her that despite her repeated corrections. I wanted to thank you for the work you're doing. The new protocols you're developing, they're going to save lives. Real lives, people I fly with. That's the goal, Chief. I know you probably get tired of hearing about your father, but I wanted you to know what you're doing here. It's exactly the kind of work he'd be proud of. Using that precision he taught you, but for healing instead of." Harrison trailed off. "Instead of killing," Emma finished. "It's what he wanted for me, actually." Near the end, he told me that the most important shots he ever took were the ones he chose not to take. Harrison nodded thoughtfully. "Precision with purpose." "Exactly." That night, Emma called Williams from her temporary quarters. "How are things at Bragg?" "Smooth. Your team is handling everything perfectly. You train them well. How's the Night Stalker's assignment?" "Good. Really good, actually. I'm remembering why I love this work. And the soldiers? They treating you right?" Emma smiled. "They're treating me like a professional. It's exactly what I needed. Your father would be proud, you know? Not of your shooting, he was always proud of that, but of what you've built, the way you found your own path." After hanging up, Emma sat by the window of her quarters, looking out at the base where elite soldiers prepared for missions that might take them anywhere in the world. She thought about her journey from the ghost nurse hiding in plain sight to a recognized expert in combat medicine, from someone running from her father's legacy to someone building on it in her own way. Jackson had taught her precision, but Emma had learned to apply it with compassion. He'd shown her strength, but she discovered how to use it for healing rather than harm. She was finally becoming the person he'd always believed she could be, not a copy of the Phantom, but something uniquely her own. Emma Whitaker, combat medic, instructor, and guardian of lives rather than taker of them. Her father's daughter, but also herself. The precision remained. The purpose had evolved. And for the first time since Jackson's death, Emma felt truly at peace with who she was becoming. 3 years after the incident at the shooting range, Emma stood before an audience of military medical personnel from around the world. The International Combat Medicine Conference was the most prestigious gathering in the field, and Emma had been invited as the keynote speaker to discuss her revolutionary trauma protocols. Precision in medicine, Emma told the assembled doctors, medics, and researchers, isn't just about technical skill. It's about making the right decision at the right moment, under conditions where there's no room for error. It's about understanding that every action has consequences, and those consequences ripple far beyond the immediate moment. In the audience, she could see faces that had become familiar over the past few years, colleagues from her travels to different bases, medical professionals who'd implemented her protocols, soldiers whose lives had been saved by techniques she'd developed. Her work had spread far beyond Fort Bragg, creating a network of medical professionals united by shared standards of excellence. After her presentation, Emma was approached by Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the conference organizer. "Emma, that was extraordinary. The response has been overwhelming. We've had requests from 12 different countries asking about implementing your protocols. I'm glad the work is making a difference. It's more than that. You've fundamentally changed how we think about combat medicine. The integration of precision techniques with trauma care, the emphasis on calm decision-making under pressure, it's revolutionary." Emma smiled, thinking about her father's lessons, about the precision he drilled into her through years of training. "I had a good teacher." That evening, at the conference dinner, Emma found herself at a table with military medical leaders from around the world. The conversation was animated, technical, focused on the kind of challenges that had defined her career. She was no longer Jackson Whitaker's daughter trying to escape his legacy. She was Emma Whitaker, recognized in her own right as one of the leading experts in combat medicine. "Dr. Whitaker," said Colonel Martinez from the Spanish Military Medical Corps, "I wanted to ask about your transition from combat medic to researcher. What drove you to pursue this path?" Emma considered the question, thinking about the journey that had brought her here. "I lost my father 3 years ago. He was a Marine, a sniper, someone who dedicated his life to precision and service. After he died, I struggled with how to honor his memory while finding my own path. She paused, looking around the table at faces that showed understanding rather than curiosity. These were people who'd faced similar challenges, who understood the weight of legacy and the difficulty of building something new while honoring the past. I realized that the precision he taught me, the attention to detail, the calm under pressure, the commitment to excellence, those qualities could serve healing as well as warfare. Maybe better. And the shooting? Martinez asked. The stories. About your marksmanship skills? Emma had learned to handle these questions with grace. My father taught me many things. Shooting was just one of them. The principles are the same whether you're putting a bullet where it needs to go or placing a surgical stitch. Precision, preparation, understanding the consequences of your actions. The conversation moved on to technical topics, but Emma found herself reflecting on how much had changed since that morning at Fort Bragg when she'd first demonstrated her shooting skills. She'd spent years running from her abilities, then learning to embrace them, and finally understanding how to use them in service of something larger than herself. Her phone buzzed with a text from Williams. Saw the conference coverage online. Your father would be proud. Emma smiled and typed back. He taught me to aim true. I just chose a different target. The next morning, Emma flew back to Fort Bragg, where her office was filled with requests for consultation, invitations to speak, and updates from the medics she'd trained who were now serving around the world. Her protocols were being used by special forces units on 3 continents, and the mortality rates for combat trauma were dropping wherever her techniques were implemented. But the most satisfying part of her day was the routine work training young medics, reviewing casualty reports, refining protocols based on field experience. Emma had built something that would outlast her, a legacy of precision applied to healing rather than harm. Colonel Adams stopped by in the afternoon with news. Emma, I just got word from Washington. You're being awarded the Secretary of Defense Medal for exceptional civilian service. It's recognition for your contributions to military medicine, the lives you saved through your protocols. Emma felt a complex mix of emotions: pride, satisfaction, and something that might have been closure. Thank you, sir. That means a great deal. There's something else. They want you to consider a position at the Pentagon, leading the entire Military Medical Research Division. It would mean leaving Fort Bragg, but the impact you could have. Emma looked out her office window at the training facility where her journey had begun, where she'd learned to stop hiding from who she was and start building on it instead. Can I think about it? Of course. But Emma, whatever you decide, know that you've already accomplished something extraordinary here. You've honored your father's memory while creating your own legacy. That evening, Emma sat in her apartment with her father's M24 across her lap. She'd taken it out of storage for the first time in months, not to clean it or maintain it, but simply to remember. The rifle was exactly as Jackson had left it, perfectly maintained, precision crafted. A tool designed for one purpose, but capable of teaching lessons that extended far beyond its intended use. Emma opened the letter her father had written, the one she'd read hundreds of times, but never stopped learning from. Precision with purpose, strength with compassion. That's what I taught you. That's who you are. She understood now what he'd been trying to tell her. It wasn't about rejecting her abilities or embracing them completely. It was about choosing how to use them, what purpose they would serve, what kind of legacy they would create. Emma had made her choice. She would stay at Fort Bragg, continue training medics, keep developing protocols that saved lives rather than took them. She would honor her father's memory not by becoming him, but by becoming the best version of herself. The ghost nurse was gone, replaced by someone who commanded respect through competence and compassion. The hidden weapon had become a healer. The sniper's daughter had become a teacher, and precision had found its truest purpose in the service of life rather than death. Emma Whitaker had finally come home to who she was meant to be. Outside her window, the lights of Fort Bragg glowed in the darkness, and somewhere on the base, young medics were studying the protocol she'd developed, preparing to save lives. With the precision her father had taught her and the compassion she discovered for herself, the legacy continued, transformed but unbroken, aimed true at a target worth hitting. Jackson Whitaker had taught his daughter to be a weapon. Emma Whitaker had chosen to be a healer instead. Both decisions required precision. Both served something larger than themselves. Both honored the responsibility that came with extraordinary skill. The difference was in the choice of targets, and Emma had chosen life over death, building over destroying, hope over fear. She'd aimed true and hit exactly what she was meant to hit. Her father would have been proud. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world.